Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journeys, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2024. And that brings us to a title which actually already currently exists in the Criterion Collection physical media catalog at spine number 501. But this year, on the occasion of this year 2024, the Criterion Collection has re-released this film based upon what is described as a new 4K digital restoration, and I'd like to speak a little bit more about that as we proceed with this video. But before that, my dear friends, let me say what the title is. This is a work which is described as being from the year 1984, and the name of the filmmaker is Wim Wenders, and the name of the work is Paris, Texas. This is the film which is described as being from the year 1984, and this is directed by Wim Wenders, written by Sam Shepard, adaptation by L.M. Kit Carson, with music by Ry Cooder, and starring, among others, people like Hunter Carson and Dean Stockwell and Aurore Clement, and also starring Natasha Kinski and Harry Dean Stanton. So this is the very special film, beautiful work, very eloquent and elegiac, and very much part of the scene of Americana from one of the great filmmakers, who is Wim Wenders. So many things to say about this, and indeed, my dear friends, I have had the great pleasure of speaking about this film, Paris, Texas, on a number of occasions, I think, in the context of my YouTube channel over the years. So I think what I would like to do, I've already done a long form discussion, or I think a number of long form discussions on Paris, Texas. And so I don't want to bore you, my dear friends, yet again with another long form discussion of mine. If you are interested in a discussion, then of course you might be able to find such discussions that I've done in the past on Paris, Texas on this YouTube channel. But for purposes of today, if it's okay, then I'd like to go straight into aspects of what this new Criterion 2024 release is. Just to take a step back, as some of you may know, we've actually had this film, Paris, Texas, on an earlier Blu-ray, which was, here it says in the back, circa 2009. And so this is quite several years ago, in fact. And this was purported to be based on a high definition digital transfer, and also, according to this, had been supervised and approved by director Wim Wenders at aspect ratio 1.78 to 1. Well, now, on this occasion of 2024, we have what is described as a new restoration, a 4K restoration, which I think had, there's actually a logo, also indication about certain festivals like the Cannes Film Festival from a couple years back. And this is, so new 4K digital restoration, and the 4K digital restoration disc is at 1.66 to 1 aspect ratio. So there are a number of differences and a number of interesting observations that I think one can make with regard to this new 2024 release from Criterion, and how it, for instance, might hold up with, say, a previous Blu-ray release. Incidentally, we'll talk about the Blu-ray because it's also part of this 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo package. It's actually the same Blu-ray. I think my understanding is carried over from the previous Blu-ray release from several years back, because we have different transfer versions that are at play here, but I'll speak a little bit more about that later. But with that in mind, my dear friends, let us, if it's okay, then just take a slightly different approach with this discussion. So I'd like to focus very briefly. I'll talk maybe less than I'm usually accustomed to on this channel. I'll talk a little bit about the the release overall, and very briefly about the commentary track and the supplements which are carried over from previous Criterion releases. But while I do that, I'd like to focus just my personal impressions, my subjective view on how I feel about the 2024 Criterion release and this 4K restoration, and as it compares, at least as far as I feel, as someone who's seen this film a number of times. I'm not an expert when it comes to this film, but I have seen it quite a number of times thanks to previous, say, Criterion releases. But with that general and albeit, and I admit, very, very limited context that I have and the limited amount of information and knowledge that I have about this film. With that in mind, or bearing that in mind, let me now, if it's okay, just focus on how I feel about the 2024 release and the transfer. Again, my dear friends, if you're still interested in how I feel about the film itself, there are other video discussions on this channel about my long form discussions about the film, which is a beautiful film, really, really great film. Um, so if you're interested, please check out those separate videos. But for now, let us focus our attention, if it's okay, on the specificities of this 2024 release from Criterion of Paris, Texas. Okay, so with that, my dear friends, let's now go straight into this new 4K digital restoration, which is purported to be the basis of the 4K UHD disc from Criterion here. So let me just, again, take a step back. This is the Criterion Collection has re-released this film, Paris, Texas, on this new 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo edition. We have two discs, the 4K UHD disc, and then we have the Blu-ray disc, so two discs. On the 4K disc, what we have is what is purported to be this new 4K digital restoration. And then on the Blu-ray disc, what we have is what I understand is the basis, the version of the film that was the basis of the high def version that we saw on the previous Blu-ray, the 1.78 to 1 aspect ratio. So that's my understanding. The 1.78 to 1 aspect ratio, say, presentation is what we find on the Blu-ray disc, and then this new restoration 1.66 to 1 aspect ratio version or presentation is what we find on the 4K disc. Now that's based on my eye and how I understand it based on my previous viewings, many viewings in fact, of the older Blu-ray release. Okay, so in that way, I think if you have the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo, my sense is, my dear friends, you can also uh, uh, do the comparative analysis yourself. You can try to compare your watch of the 4K disc versus your watch of the film on the Blu-ray and see if you can spot any similarities or differences, or how you feel as you watch, say, the version that you can find on the Blu-ray and the version that you can, say, find on the 4K UHD disc. So that's to say that I think that kind of exercise is very fun and very meaningful, because I can definitely say that albeit there are certain subtle differences, the differences I think are still quite potentially impactful. And I, for one, uh, uh, despite my failings in a lot of departments, and one of which being my inability to kind of grasp and explain in any good and efficient technical manner, I'm unable to explain um, the technical aspects of sort of the restoration in 4K and the like. So I apologize for that, but I can only express it from my own subjective viewpoint and my limited language capacity. But of course, that's another way to invite you, my dear friends, to make up your own minds and how you feel when you watch this version versus another version. There's no authoritative or definitive answer as to which is better. That is, I think, ultimately up to you as the viewer to decide. The only thing I can do is share what I feel. You can feel similarly, you can feel differently. That's definitely up to you. And I think having both, I don't want to say versions, but both presentations available to a certain degree anyway, I think makes that a very promising exercise indeed. And I don't think there needs to be one answer over there. I mean, one can feel one way about the 4K presentation, and one can feel another way about the Blu-ray presentation or the high def presentation, but still feel very much in sync, in tune, and enjoy each presentation or version on their own merits in their own way. And I'm tending to gravitate towards that kind of compromise solution, although I'll explain exactly how I got there. Okay, So with all that stuff out of the way, or well, not out of the way, but all that stuff, because it's still relevant, I think. But with all that stuff now I've established, now let me go into how I feel about the 4K restoration. Okay, so before we go to that, I should take the booklet out. I've already taken the booklet out. It's a stable booklet. It's much like the stable booklet from the earlier Blu-ray right here. Although there are some subtle differences, which I'll try to get to in a moment. But let's see. So yes, so in any event, so this is the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray Combo Edition 2024 release booklet, and it's a stable booklet, and it's wonderful. And we have all the writings and the pictures and the layout that's carried over from the earlier booklet. So that's really wonderful, and all the writings are there. So it's great. But I'm looking at page 40, and it says on page 40 at the top about the master, which is right here, and I quote. Paris, Texas is presented in the aspect ratio of 1.66 to 1 on the 4K Ultra HD disc and 1.78 to 1 on the Blu-ray. Okay, so that itself is already explaining that we have two formats. One format, the 1.66 to 1 for the 4K, and then 1.78 to 1 on the Blu-ray, which again corresponds to the earlier Criterion release from 10 plus years ago, which is at 1.78 to 1 aspect ratio. Okay, now let's continue on. Supervised and approved by director Wim Wenders, the new 4K restoration presented on the 4K UHD disc was undertaken by the Wim Wenders Stiftung and created from the 35mm original camera negative. The 5.1 surround soundtrack was carefully cleaned and remastered under the supervision of the director using the 35mm original magnetic track. The feature is presented in Dolby Vision HDR, high dynamic range, on the 4K UHD disc, and high definition SDR, standard dynamic range, on the Blu-ray. The 4K restoration was made possible with the support of Chanel and the German Film Heritage Funding Program, FFE. Okay, so those are the liner notes for the presentation or the master for this new 2024 release. Now let me turn your attention to the liner notes for the Blu-ray from 10 plus years ago. About what was at the time considered to be a new high-def digital transfer. So this is from 10 plus years ago for the older Blu-ray. Paris, Texas is presented in the director's preferred aspect ratio of 1.78 to 1. On standard 4:3 televisions, the image will appear letterboxed. On widescreen televisions, the image should fill the screen. Supervised and approved by director Wim Wenders, this new high-definition digital transfer was created on a spirit it is seen from the original 35mm camera negative, etc. Yes, so, and then there's some technical information there about that. But this is a very interesting point, the high-def transfer from 10 plus years ago is at 1.78 to 1, and at the time, it was described as being the director's preferred aspect ratio. And also at the time, this was described as being supervised and approved by director Wim Wenders. So the 1.78 to 1 earlier Blu-ray release had essentially the director's stamp of approval. And in fact, the director, according to the Criterion liner notes, went so far as to even prefer this 1.78 to 1 aspect ratio. So that, therefore, to me, indicated that that was therefore the kind of definitive version of Paris, Texas. And again, I've never seen the film Paris, Texas in the theater, so I don't have the best frame of reference, unfortunately. But that's what I was going with, and I was therefore relying on this version going forward. But when I first heard about this new 4K restoration from, I think it's very recent. I think it was maybe about a couple years ago or so. So very, very recent. This new 4K restoration, I wasn't quite sure what it was. I didn't see it in the theater, but my first exposure to it was this new Criterion release. And the 4K restoration, I thought, was very, very good, but also in some instances quite different from my customary viewing experience with the film based upon my earlier experiences with the earlier Blu-ray. Okay, so for instance, the aspect ratio is different for this new 4K release, 1.66 to 1 versus 1.78 to 1. Now, you can go to websites that are much better than mine, than my YouTube channel. You can find like shot-by-shot comparisons of this. But when I first heard this news, I thought that just by my very simple thinking, I thought that maybe the 1.66 to 1 aspect ratio of the new 4K restoration might mean maybe some slight, not cropping, but maybe an image framing such that I might not necessarily get what I thought might be the full version, the full frame version that I was again accustomed to with the 1.78 to 1 release of Players Texas from some time back. But when I then saw the film, the 1.66 to 1 4K restoration, and I looked back on the on the Blu-ray, I noted that in a very fascinating way, it seems like you get more stuff actually on the periphery of the frame with the new 4K 1.66 to 1. And I was trying to do, again, I was trying to do as best as I could a kind of side-by-side comparison, but I couldn't do it all the way because again my mind is not I'm very terrible at multitasking. But um, what I did was I watched it in full in one version and then I watched it in full in another version. I tried also to maybe stop and then try to do a comparative and with different monitors as well. It wasn't a perfect side-by-side comparison for me, but I did note that there were some scenes that did feel like a little bit more opened up. I don't know if that makes any sense. Not so much, but just a tad, a little smidge. For example, there's a scene where the characters, like Dean Stockwell and Aurore Clement and Harry Dean Stanton, are sitting around a table. It's a darkened kitchen around the kitchen table, and there's like a red screen of curtain or blinds, and then in the distance there's also like a kitchen countertop, and the three of them are the characters are sitting around a table. And you actually can see in the 1.781, this frame goes in a certain direction. But then when you watch it in 1.66 to 1, it kind of felt a little bit more opened up in an interesting way. And then I looked and I could see that I think I could see more. And that could be maybe my eyes playing tricks on me, but in fact I thought, yes, I could see more than what I was accustomed to. And also through the like little things like shots of Harry Dean Stanton walking by a sign, like a motel sign or something outdoors. I couldn't see the words before, but I think in the 1.66 to 1 aspect ratio version, I actually could make out a little bit more of the words. Not all of them, but a little bit more. So that was an indication that, oh, maybe there's something going on here with this new restoration. Maybe I'm able to see just a little bit more of the world. And maybe that's in sacrificing some other aspect ratio considerations in other parts of the frame. I'm not sure. It could be. Again, I haven't done a proper frame by frame analysis, but again, based on my own sort of subjective take, and again, I'm sitting in my chair watching this film as I prefer. When I watch it, I want to soak it in. I want to feel the experience. Um, I'm not good at a strict side-by-side technical analysis, but just even in that sort of subjective and a general soaking in of the experience perspective, I could tell that there was just a little bit of a kind of opening up of the frame, which I thought was had a subtle liberating feeling to it, which I thought was great. And indeed, it did feel slightly more opened up now that I thought about it, because the Blu-ray I thought felt very opened up indeed, but the 4K release feels just that little bit more opened up, which I find quite fascinating. Now, there's also the way that the new 4K release to me feels a little bit more opened up in some of the uses of color. There are some instances, not all, but to my eye, there are some instances where the color palette, of some of the scenes seems slightly different. For example, there's a shot where Dean Stockwell is driving, and we actually see him. It's in a darkened time, and we see him, and his eyes are through the rear view mirror, and his eyes you can see are lit up. But in the version that I usually see in the Blu-ray, it's kind of a muted yellow tint to the way that the light is reflecting off of his face, and then surrounding him is sort of bluish aspect of the darkened outside highway as he's driving. Well, here in the 4K, I think the same shot feels slightly more muted in terms of the yellow tints in terms of the light reflecting off of his face through the rearview mirror, it seems slightly more muted. And then the bluish, kind of maybe bluish neon, for lack of a better phrase, that I kind of associate with that scene in the Blu-ray, seems a not too, but slightly muted as well, toning down the sort of bluish glow and making it more of a slightly grayer blue, if that makes any sense. A similar type of effect occurs in a scene a little bit later, a lot later in the film, with Harry Dean Stanton, and he's walking through some hallways before he makes a very a key meeting place with another key character of the film. And he's walking in, and the Blu-ray always had that scene with a slightly greenish neon haze to it, slightly in the Blu-ray, and I was always used to that. And it's a film that's really rich with color, but that blue, it was like he was in a slight uh, green or neon green fog, which I thought was really cool in Blu-ray. Here in the 4K, I note that it felt like that neon greenish quality was subdued in the 4K, and the way that it was subdued meant that we could see more of the sort of delineations in Harry Dean Stanton's figure and his silhouette and his clothing, etc., and also his skin texture and skin tone in a very interesting way. This type of maybe interesting way in which colors seem to be not overly toned down or muted, but I feel like there's a slight, how should I put it? There's a slight uh, bringing down the degree of the intensity of color that one might say, at least I felt, is present in the Blu-ray. And again, I really appreciated that in the Blu-ray. I felt that it had a kind of sense of maybe, I mean, for lack of a, like richness of color palette, the sense of the colors of a kind of classic Americana spirit, which I think is also very much part of Paris, Texas. All the way down to the colors of the American flag, or the way in which this type of a primary color usage also is a part of the screen to create a sense of the myth or the legend, which is also very much key to Paris, Texas, which I thought was great. Also feeling very, in an interesting, artificial or constructed in a purposeful way, thus giving a sense of not just legend and myth, but also theater. The kind of postcard chic and sheen to it, which I think is also very apropos of the look of Paris, Texas. So in that way, I always associated that with maybe subliminally, with my Blu-ray watch of this. But with this new 4K release and the way in which, say, some of the blues, the neon blues, are more subdued, and some of the neon greens are a bit more subdued. Also, in terms of slight opening up of the frame. There is a way in which I feel like the 4K release almost was like um, I felt not I felt like I was already close with the characters when I watched the film every time I watched them, but for some reason now I feel like it's an even there's maybe less filter between myself and the characters, in a manner of speaking. It feels more closer to a kind of my visual perception of what reality is to me. Like in my eyes, things are not lit in a neon way. Things are lit in a more subdued way in my eyes as I perceive the room around me, etc. So that I felt like there was more of a distance that was shortened between me and the people that I was watching. Thus, the feeling I had was I felt a little bit closer to them. If that makes any sense, and if it doesn't, I apologize. But I felt that a little bit of more closeness to that which I was watching, which really took me off guard. I wasn't really quite prepared for that type of feeling. Plus, also being exposed to a frame that I felt was that little bit more opened up. So the frame was opening up, and also there was a filter that seemed to be of light, which I think works effectively in and of itself. But with it not being there as pronounced as I'm used to, there's a sense of a closeness. And queer whether that works for you. I mean, I think it does. Although I think there is a good argument to say that either approach, a slight distance of space or that removal of space, I think either approach works. I mean, after all, the film Paris, Texas could be said to be about just the endeavor on the part of characters to make connections. And maybe some characters are able to, maybe others they are trying to, but it's just they are missing that last step or that last second to last step or something. So it's just that extra bit of distance that has yet to be traversed. Maybe that feeling of just being apart is really important, and in that way, maybe the Blu-ray watch is better. I don't know. It may be more consistent with that frame of mind and or frame of interpretation of the film than say the 4K. Or the opposite is true. Maybe you can feel the pain or the emotional trajectory that little extra more by the sense of closeness that one might be said to be feeling when watching it through the 4K release. Again, it's a great debate to have, and so I think this is for me. That's one example of where I don't see one version reign supreme over the other for me. Although I must say that the 4K does surprise me in a lot of real positive ways that makes me look at the film from a slightly different perspective. I should also be very clear as well. I wouldn't say that the 4K release is overall using a color palette that's quote unquote more muted than, say, what I'm used to in the Blu ray. On the contrary, there are other points in the film where I can see a little bit of color or a little bit of color pronouncement that I wasn't used to in the Blu ray. For instance, I think there's some scenes involving the background and things like the way that a gas station sign looks. I always thought in the Blu-ray, like there was a scene involving Harry Dean Stanton walking across a way, and then behind him is a gas station. I think it's a gas station, and then, or it's an establishment, and it's nighttime and it's closed. But there was never any. It was kind of enveloped in shadow, so it didn't appear to be overly applied with color. Whereas now there's a slight line of color that I wasn't used to before in the 4K, at least as far as I know. It's like, oh, that's interesting. And which is consistent also in a way with what Harry Dean Stanton is wearing at the time. So it's a kind of bit of cool color coordination. I never thought about that before. But it's just little things like that that actually make certain color palette pronouncements in the 4K on the one hand, or in some scenes in the 4K on the one hand, while also creating a sense of maybe counterbalance, subduing of color enhancements on the other. And it has a really cool effect. It really does. So my deepest apologies, not being able to show a side-by-side comparison. I really should be able to do that. Maybe it might be more of an effective video for people who are watching. I apologize. I can only speak from my heart, as it were, when without the great skills of a YouTube editor, which I'm certainly not a great YouTube video maker, but I can only speak just what I feel, and then which is to say that it's a really interesting experience watching the 4K restoration of this. It is really interesting. So yeah, you're getting, I think. And so therefore, which is better? I mean, I don't know. I think it's definitely the case. It is definitely the case that if you already have Paris, Texas, but you have Paris, Texas on, say, the older transfer, I would say that, and if you love Paris, Texas, I would say that it is worth it. It is so worth it to check out the new 4K restoration if you haven't already. I mean, you were getting in all intents and purposes, you are getting a different version of the film. And in many ways, it could be said to be a new way of experiencing Paris, Texas. Now, then you can decide for yourself which version or which experience of Paris, Texas you prefer. And I think it's totally legitimate to fall one way or the other. I won't say here that the 4K is automatically better than the Blu-ray or or vice versa. No, that's not how I feel. You can, of course, come to such conclusion. That's perfectly within your purview and your prerogative, my dear friends. And if you do, that's great, and I appreciate that. And your choices and your feelings are your own, your views are your own, and I respect those. But for me personally, I really believe that each version has its own merits, and it allows me to experience the film Paris, Texas, or the story of Paris, Texas, in that version's sort of light, but I must admit too that it gives me different feelings, however nuanced, however subtly different. It gives me different feelings and potentially different outcomes when I watch the film from beginning, middle, and end. I don't know which I prefer, but maybe that's not the right question for me to ask, which I prefer, but rather how does it make me become involved or engaged in the film in their ways. And so that's my again roundabout way of saying that I think having the 4K available is really great and a really great option. Just to then be able to give you a sense of maybe how you feel when you watch the film and how what your reactions are when you're watching it through this version versus another version. And maybe in that calculus, you might also feel like you are becoming even closer to the film. I certainly feel that way right now. Again, I don't consider myself an expert when it comes to Paris, Texas, but that's one of the great things about having many versions available to a film. You can watch different versions, you can analyze how you feel, and maybe that in that analysis you can feel like sort of a collective, a comprehensive standpoint you can have is you feel that much closer to the film because of the rigor that is involved in that analysis of trying to ascertain why it is you are reacting in one way when you watch one version versus how you feel or why you're reacting in another way when you're watching another version. At the end of the day, you do feel closer to the film. So I think that ultimately is among, I think, the great outcomes of an exercise like this. So for anyone who is a fan of Paris, Texas, but you have the high def Blu-ray version, I strongly recommend getting the 4K. Maybe you'll prefer the 4K better than the Blu-ray. Maybe you will still stick to your Blu-ray, but that's okay. It is it is arguably and perhaps subtly, but still arguably a new way of watching Paris, Texas, at least as far as I'm concerned. With that in mind, the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo edition does have the two discs, and to my understanding, the Blu-ray here is the same 1.78 to 1 transfer as the older Blu-ray, and then you have the new 4K, which is the new 1.66 to 1 restoration. So you have the opportunity actually to compare and contrast just with one purchase. It's a slightly higher than the Blu-ray standalone edition, I get it, but if you get it at a 50% off sale or even a markdown price opportunity, it's certainly worth it. So I guess that's my 2 cents when it comes to the presentation, the 1.66 to 1, the new presentation from Wim Wenders. And by the way, I should point out that the earlier Blu-ray had indicated that the director's, the 1.78 to 1 aspect ratio was what the director had preferred, but the new 1.66 to 1 version master liner notes do indicate that this was supervised and approved by director Wim Wenders, as was the previous 1.78 to 1 high definition transfer. It was yet at the time also described as being supervised and approved by director Wim Wenders. So my sense is, which is the one that the director prefers. I'm not sure. Maybe the director feels the same way. Maybe the director has different feelings about what Wim Wenders had felt about the 1.78 to 1 aspect ratio versus how he feels about the 1.66 to 1 aspect ratio with regards to Paris, Texas. But in any event, this does seem like, yes, a director-approved version, this new 4K restoration, as is the 1.78 to 1 versions. That's really interesting. But with that in mind, my dear friends, yes, I feel like I'm seeing this anew, afresh. I'm still almost grappling with how I feel about it, but I'm in a very positive direction already, and it's also making me feel like helping me to understand why I was feeling about it in a certain way when watching it on the Blu-ray, and I think I feel much closer to it now than I ever have. So in that way, I'm very, very, very pleased overall with my experience with this new 2024 release from Criterion. Okay, so now let us turn our attention to the supplements very, very quickly. So I think I have spoken about these supplements before elsewhere, so I don't want to focus too much on them now, although they are very good, and they do cover, or they are what we had in the previous Blu-ray. So just keep that in mind. To my understanding, we're not getting anything new. Oh, and by the way, this is the menu of this, and just like the 4K, this is the Blu-ray. I'm sorry, the 4K is also like this with the the sign Paris, Texas, and also the cars that drive back and forth. That's really cool. That the detail is still preserved. It was always like that with the earlier Blu-ray, but that's really cool. Okay, and also I should point out that the 4K has the film again with that version, and then we also have the film on the Blu-ray with that version. Let me turn on the volume here. So what we have in terms of, I'm sorry, I'm breathless because I'm still excited about Paris, Texas, and the invigorating experience of watching it from the 2024 release. But please forgive me. What was I saying? Oh yes, so you can watch the film. The versions, the different versions aside, you can watch the film either on the 4K disc or the Blu-ray disc. And then also on the 4K disc or the Blu-ray disc, you can also watch the film accompanying with by the commentary track, which is a great commentary track, by the way, and it's also carried over from the previous Criterion release. This commentary track is from Wim Wenders. Oh my goodness, this is wonderful. It goes into the background and just the elements of the film, the Sam Shepard writing, and the great performances. So I've listened to it so many times. It's great. Wim Wenders is, it's great whenever you have a chance to listen to Wim Wenders in an interview or commentaries like this. So that's still carried over from the previous release. Okay, that's number one. The second thing is, if you want to go for the supplements, you're going to have to take out the 4K disc and then put in the Blu-ray disc, because all the supplements we found on the Blu-ray disc. And indeed, the supplements are what we found in the previous releases of this. That's my understanding. So the first section is interviews, and then we have the Wim Wenders interview, and then which is this interview with Wim Wenders was conducted by German journalist Roger Willemsen in 2001. And then The Road to Paris, Texas, which is, and I quote, these interviews with Wim Wenders, cinematographer Robbie Mueller, and composer Ray Cooder, actors Harry Dean Stanton, Peter Falk, Dennis Hopper, and Hans Zischler, director Samuel Fuller, author Patricia Highsmith, and film critic Kraft Wetzel were conducted in 1989 by director Paul Joyce for Lucida Productions. So this is also what we had in previous. This is really great too. It's also like focusing in on Paris, Texas, also other aspects, other touch points in Wim Wenders' career, his overall approach. Very highly recommended. And I've seen this a number of times already as well. Then Claire Denis and Alison Anders. So the first one, we have Claire Denis and Alison Anders being interviewed. And then Alison Anders being interviewed. So the first one is Claire, it says here, and I quote, Claire Denis and Alison Anders, who would go on to become renowned directors in their own right, served as first assistant director and production assistant, respectively, on Paris, Texas. Denis appears here in conversation with critic Kent Jones. It's really great, by the way, and they're all great here. And then, as part of her discussion, Alison Anders, reads from the diary she kept during the film's production. These interviews were filmed in October 2000, and these are so fantastic, so wonderful, and so marvelous. And again, they are part of the previous release, so please check these out if you can. Then Cinema, which is from a French television program, which is also from before, and this is also great. And it says, this segment from the French television program Cinema, Wim Wenders Hollywood April 84, features Wim Wenders and composer Ray Cooder working on the score for Paris, Texas. It was directed by Claude Ventura and first broadcast April 2nd, 1984. So this is kind of like a contemporary to the timing of the film. Again, this was a film from 1984. Really, again, and also the music, the Wim Wenders musical collaboration is incredibly important here. So please check this out if you can. Then we have deleted scenes in Super 8. And we have a deleted scene section and then a Super 8 section. And it says here, the following deleted scenes from Paris, Texas are presented with the optional audio commentary track by Wim Wenders. To listen to the commentary while viewing, press the audio key on your remote at any time. Let me stop there. Yeah, this is... there are a number of scenes here that are, very curious, and I think having the option of the audio commentary track is great in terms of understanding why they were excised and the purpose behind that, and other reasons as well. So, and then the Super 8 footage, and it says the Super 8 footage has been set to music. Travis's monologue from Chapter 13 is presented as an alternate audio track and may be heard by pressing the audio key on your remote at any. Oh, the Super 8 footage is really it's connected also to a very kind of key moment and a critical moment in the film where Super 8 footage is utilized to kind of character development aspects. So are really great. So please check it out if you can. Also with the audio options being made available. Then we have galleries and the trailers. So the galleries are written in the West, which is, it says here, in 1983, Wim Wenders traveled alone through Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and California with a 5x6 medium format camera in search of locations for Paris, Texas. He shot a number of photographs of the lonely Southwest landscape, which were collected in the book Written in the West. Excerpts from the preface are included in the booklet with this release. Which is what we have here as well. So the booklet we're referring to is right here. So please check that out if you can as well. So this is a kind of slideshow presentation of photographs. Really great, by the way. So those are just but some excerpts of that. Let me now go back to the menu. How do I do that? I always forget. There we go. Oh, how do I do this? I always forget here. Pardon me while I take care of this. There we go. Whoops. Whoops. Oh my goodness. Technical difficulties. Stand by while we alleviate some of these technical difficulties. Thank you very much for holding on. So I've now managed to maneuver myself back to the sub menu. And now we're going to go to the second of the two galleries, Robin Holland. And I'm going to jump right to this, again, slideshow presentation aspect. And then let's see here. Yes, I always forget which button I press to go back. But anyway, this says, and I quote, I talked my way into a job as the unit photographer on Paris, Texas. This was highly unlikely since I'd never worked as a still photographer before, but I loved film in general, especially New German cinema and the films of the great B-movie directors like Douglas Sirk, Samuel Fuller, and Nick Ray, which had inspired Wim Wenders and Werner Fassbinder. And I thought those were qualifications of a sort. And that is the first paragraph that begins this introduction to this great, this wonderful gallery from Robin Holland. And again, more photographs of this sort, which is really lovely. So I strongly suggest checking this out as well. Really fantastic stuff indeed. This is also carried over from the previous release. And now let me try to return back to the main menu, and I'll see you in a bit. And then now I'm back, and so we have the trailer, which rounds out the supplements. And the trailer is there. It's also a great trailer. What we have is it was already really great from the older Blu-ray, and now all that is carried over into the Blu-ray part of this 4K UHD release, with the commentary track also being carried over, and that is also made available for your viewing, accompanying your viewing of the film either on the 4K disc or the Blu-ray disc. So the commentary is on both discs, because the supplements are on the Blu-ray only, and they are consistent with what we had before. And so nothing, I don't detect anything new, I think, at least as far as I understand it, nothing new in terms of how any new supplements on the occasion of 2024 release of Paris, Texas. Again, it would have been nice, maybe it would have been interesting to have had a new supplement, maybe some critical discussion about why certain changes might have been made for the new 4K restoration, etc. That would have been interesting to hear, or a new commentary track, whatever. But I can't complain. Any criticism I have on this point are very minor, because again, what we have is really quite astounding. So, and also let me just take this opportunity to round that discussion by saying, again, this is the booklet for the new 4K release in here, and then what I have in my right hand here is the booklet for the older Blu-ray release, and you can see the Blu-ray release. It's the same photo as is being used for the 4K booklet, but the photo itself, I don't know, this is interesting too. Now the Blu-ray release has a slightly more pronounced bluish color to it than the photo that was used in the for this older Blu-ray. And look at the back too. The same thing, a similar kind of effect is happening. So this is the 4K release booklet, and this is the Blu-ray release booklet from several years. You can see too, there's more pronounced. You can actually tell there's more kind of the chiseled look of Harry Dean Stanton's face being more pronounced on the new 4K release back cover of the booklet rather than on the older Blu-ray. It's the same face, it's the same photo, but That's an interesting choice. Very, very interesting indeed. Look at that. So this is the blue, and you can tell also too that the Natasha Kinski's face in this new 4K booklet, there you can tell that a little bit more features in the face that are detectable than in the Blu-ray. This is actually a really interesting visual representation. I'm not sure how accurate it is in terms of the way that it actually looks in terms of the film when you play it on the discs, but this is an interesting maybe possible example, maybe anecdotal example of how I feel about how it looks in the 4K versus how it looks in the Blu-ray. Actually, maybe this might even be itself, and I can't claim that this is 100% accurate because I haven't researched it properly, but I could surmise that this could be an accurate way of considering what the 4K experience looks like versus what the Blu-ray experience looks like. I mean, again, they're really interesting, and there's a sense of distance. You know what I mean? But in any event, anyway, that's interesting. I didn't. I was even in the booklets there are some differences in the in the presentation, which is really fascinating. But the booklet for the older Blu-ray release, it's the same writings as before, which are really great. I would say too that the paper quality feels a little bit. It feels a little bit more like postcardy. There's a kind of thickness to it that isn't quite there. Maybe it is, I'm just not feeling it. But no, it's not. The paper quality in the older Blu-ray is really quite good, but this has a little bit more of a postcard quality to it, which is, I think, if I'm correct, it's very apropos because, in fact, the front and back flaps are meant to be postcards. So that's interesting. I mean, that's interesting. It's a little bit interesting. The writings themselves are the same. Which are great writings from before. Nick Roddick's On the Road Again, and then Interviews, which is great, and then from Written in the West as well. So those writings are carried over as well. So that's really quite fascinating. I should point out, let me see one other thing too, which is, yeah, that's interesting. That is very interesting. Yes, that's interesting indeed. Oops, excuse me. I would note too that there's a slight difference in the way that the image looks. Here's the Blu-ray booklet versus the I'm sorry, this is the 4K booklet versus the Blu-ray booklet here on the bottom. You can see when you put them like side by side, there's a slight difference in a bluish tint with the 4K picture of this scene versus the Blu-ray picture of this scene. And actually, come to think of it, there are instances where I did mention in the 4K, there are instances when, unlike the Blu-ray, there are certain color pronouncements that come out. And indeed, I'm reminded that there are instances in the 4K. I'm not sure if I should go back and re-evaluate that scene again. But there are some instances in the 4K where it seems like there are some color pronouncements that probably I didn't detect before. So it's not a whole unidirectional thing, you know. One version is more colorful than the other. That's actually a kind of a mix of the two, depending on what scenes you're talking about. So it's quite complex, so much more complex than I'm ever able to describe here. But in any event, I should also point out to an interesting detail about the inside. This is the Blu-ray right here. And I'm just spinning it around. It's not, fortunately, it's not, this underside is not touching the inner plastic, so that's good. So I can just very gently spin it around here. But you can see, just so it's upright, this is what the older Blu-ray looked like underneath, or in the inside flap with the Natasha Kinski's face here. And actually a chapter list on this side. And I'll just take the opportunity to put the booklet back like so, and the booklet sits very nicely in that way. But the new 4K release. Sorry, I forgot to take the disc out, so I just now have taken the disc out of the machine. And let me just say that the Blu-ray disc is right here. And then if you can see the Blu-ray, that has a picture of Harry Dean Stanton. There was sort of a hazy picture of Harry Dean Stanton. And then if I put the 4K disc in there, which sits like so, you can see it's a picture of Natasha Kinski, but it's a slightly different picture of Natasha Kinski than what we had on the earlier Blu-ray from 10 years or so ago. And then as you can see on the left-hand side, the Blu-ray had a list here of the chapters, but we don't have any list like so. It's the canvas of the horizon, but that's okay. And then we have the booklet that sits in like so, and then snap the plastic casing shut like so, and then there we go. That is my assessment of the 4K release, the new 4K release of the re-release of Paris, Texas. So very interesting bit of circumstances here with this release. Really, really interesting stuff indeed. I can say from my, it's the same film, but it feels like a different experience of the same film, and it's opened itself up for some new possibilities, and I haven't yet fully grasped all of these possibilities yet. But what I can say right now, as I feel it, is I'm very excited for what this holds, and so far so good, as well as an ability for me to try to reassess as to why I was feeling in certain ways as I was when I was watching the Blu-rays. So very exciting. This is not the end of the story for me in Paris, Texas by a long shot. I'm still continuing to watch this film over and over again and learn more of the details. So I may go back to the 4K on those occasions. I may go back to the Blu-ray on those occasions, but I'll have the choice made available to me. And indeed, if you get the 4K UHD release, you'll have the best of both worlds in a sense, because it has both discs. So in any event, that's my 2 cents when it comes to the 2024 release of Paris, Texas. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great, great, great movies, including Paris, Texas, including other films by Wim Wenders, including other films in the Criterion Collection and beyond. So until we see each other again, my dear, dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.